Welcome to the Orlando Sentinel Editorial Board interview with Orlando attorney and former Congressman Alan Grayson, one of four Democrats facing off in a June 24 special election for Florida Senate District 15. That seat was vacated when incumbent Senator Geraldine Thompson died on February 13th. This seat, based in West Orange County, includes most of the cities of Winter Garden, Ocoee, Eatonville, and Apopka, as well as the neighborhoods of Paramore, Pine Hills, Washington Shores, and Dr. Phillips. The Democratic primary also includes current State Representative LaVon Bracey Davis, attorney Coretta Anthony Smith, and Randolph Bracey, who served one term in the Senate and challenged Thompson in 2024. The winner of this contest will face Republican Willie Montague in September. Before we get started, one more brief note. In almost every case, the Sentinel interviews candidates jointly. We're trying something new in this race and interviewing the candidates separately, so be sure to watch interviews with the other primary candidates as well. To the best of our ability, we'll ask each candidate to answer the same questions in roughly the same time frame. These interviews are not intended to be debates or brawls. Instead, they're a chance for each candidate to talk about what they would hope to accomplish should voters choose them. That's why we ask candidates to refrain from personal attacks and to limit their answers to 1.5 minutes per question. Each candidate will also be given 2 minutes at the end to give a brief closing statement. Joining us today is our opinion editor, Chris Fluker.
Thank you very much for joining us, and we hope that we get some great answers to our questions.
And I am Jay Reddick. I'm the Viewpoints editor. We have one more request for candidates. As you answer these questions, I know you're aware District 15 was drawn to heavily favor a Democratic candidate. Florida Democrats have steadily lost ground, both in registration numbers and legislative clout. So as we talk about specific issues facing the district, please talk about the ways that you believe a Democrat can effectively represent this district, which, as we addressed, includes some very low-income parts of Central Florida. And now over to Chris for the first question.
A week ago today, House and Senate leaders announced that they had a preliminary budget agreement. Possibly the latest that we've had something like this happen in recent memory. They are going to be, the plan is to eliminate sales tax on commercial leases and include multiple permanent sales tax exemptions that will be aimed at families, along with about $1 billion in debt reduction and additions to the state reserve rainy day fund. And that deal has been coming together with the spending elements throughout this week, but because we were starting interviews, we really want to talk about the tax cut proposals first, because those were firm. And I wondered what you thought of that, of those proposals, and if you think that they're fair for this district.
What would be fair for this district and people around the state would be a massive increase in the exemption, the homestead exemption. And the reason for that is that you cannot buy a home for $25,000. It's an unreasonable premise that doesn't exist in real life. So above all, we need to dramatically increase the exemption. And that should be the number 1, number 2, number 3, and number 4 priorities. I think that what they're doing regarding taxes, to some degree, is to try to rationalize and not have crazy loopholes and so on. But every time they get to these things, you end up with more loopholes, more exceptions, more special interests, more favors. And they need to basically chop the whole code in half, or maybe 2/3, or get rid of 3/4 of it. And that's a philosophy they're just not willing to adopt now, because lobbyists are so influential in Tallahassee. They own the place.
Actually, that leads right into my next question, which is that when you look at what the governor has talked about and what the House and Senate leaders have talked about, there's a pretty stark contrast between people who support property tax cuts, either by changing the homestead exemption or by getting rid of property taxes altogether or to some degree, and sales tax breaks. Which do you think is more fair? And I think you've kind of already answered that, but I'd like to get some more background on why you feel that way.
The property tax is a highly aggressive, irrational tax. And what it does is it reduces people's mobility, ends up with people living in places that are not suitable for their families because their family's too large, family's too small, whatever it might be. And the reason for that is that it makes the market sticky. Property taxes make the market sticky, and people can't buy and sell freely. So what you end up with is, first of all, people who don't have a lot of money paying a lot of taxes, and because 75% of Orlando owns a home. And in addition to that, you end up with a system where everybody's begging for loopholes and favors, when the people who deserve the favor, the homeowners, are left out.
Wanted to branch over to another big ticket item, that being tourist development tax. Simple question though, do you support giving local communities more flexibility in the use of TDT, and how?
Every proposal has to be judged on its merits, but the general answer to that is no. We're raising money for tourist promotion in the tourist sector, and it's reasonable to spend it in the tourist sector. If you raise a whole lot of money for instance, environmental protection, you wouldn't want that spent some other way, although the Republicans seem to think otherwise. But regardless of that, the point here is that the tax system needs to have some degree of rationality to it. I'll mention to you also, and again, this is something we talked about before. You never gave me any credit for this, but I created the Travel Promotion Act and got it through Congress after it had been stuck for 5 years in my first term in Congress. And what that does is similar to these very heavily debated local funds, but it's national. It falls on people who would be going elsewhere, not people who are coming here anyway. And the funds that are raised for it are spent primarily to promote Florida tourist attractions. And that's $1 billion. Actually, a very, very substantial amount of money. And what I was doing, thank you for the reminder, what I was doing is trying to apply a more rational way to accomplish this, to promote travel that doesn't involve diversions or anything else like that. But we benefit from it tremendously because we are #1 in tourism.
There is one other big funding challenge, especially for lawmakers who will be going to Tallahassee from Central Florida, and that is that money for local projects is often difficult to achieve. And we spoke before we started this interview about some of the accomplishments you were able to get through in Washington, D.C., bringing money home to Florida and to Central Florida. But in this particular climate, it's a big challenge for Democrats who are up against what's known as a supermajority to get projects in the budget and then to protect them from Governor DeSantis's veto pen. If you are elected, what types of local projects do you think you'll be looking for funding for? And how do you try to protect those against the current political climate in Tallahassee and in Florida throughout?
Okay. First, all my earmarks got approved. And I operated in 2 Republican Congresses and 1 Democratic Congress. The only one that didn't actually go into effect was one that my successor, Dan Webster, literally just threw in the trash can. $10 million for a local hospital. But in any event, my stuff gets approved. Okay? And part of that is because I focus on things that actually are going to matter in people's lives. I passed 121 laws through the House of Representatives in my last 4 years in Congress, more than anybody else in the country. And all 4 years, the Republicans were in charge. I had to get 30 Republican votes each time. to get a single thing passed, and I did it literally every other week. So I don't really think there's going to be a problem in that regard. And in terms of what my priorities are, we dramatically need better public services in West Orange County. We need more. It's crazy that half of the county doesn't even have water and sewer at this point. I mean, it is 2025. Last time I looked, I have a house that's worth more than $1 million, and we take our water out of a hole in the back, and then when we're done with it, we shove it below our front lawn. I don't understand why this is going on in this day and age, and that's true not just of water and sewer, but it's true of public services in general. The public services have to be provided in order for all of us to survive.
And actually, just to follow up with that really briefly, so you would support more water and sewer projects for this area?
Yes, and things like that. I used my money for water and sewer for rebuilding a 100-year-old bridge that looked like it was about to collapse to me, and things that help people in tangible ways. I brought more than $1 billion of extra money to the district for highway and road improvements because I don't like traffic either. Also tried very hard to cut the tolls, but I wasn't able to do that last time. We'll see how well I do this time. But in general, we're not getting enough of these things, and we're not getting a value for our money because Tallahassee is not making these things a priority. But I'm not talking, quote, only on traditional infrastructure. The schools, to me, are infrastructure. My own kids, thanks to an additional $150 million we got from the Department of Education, my own kids moved from a trailer school where my daughter had trouble hearing the teacher because the air conditioning unit in the wall was so loud, to a brick schoolhouse. And that's how it's supposed to work. We are supposed to have adequate or superior public services when in fact, in many cases, you can't even get people on the phone anymore. And when you show up, it's a long line. So better, more public services.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you for that answer. I wanted to take a turn to a new issue, that being immigration policy. I know that's one issue that DeSantis in the House and the Senate eventually gained agreement on. And I've got two questions about it. Give us your assessment of the legislation that was passed, first from a public policy or moral standpoint, and then we'll come back to talking about the money side.
Well, the issue that actually is ultimately presented by this is human decency. I read recently that the government took somebody who was a refugee from Myanmar and airlifted him to South Sudan. He's Asian. People in South Sudan are not. He'll be dead before he gets to customs. He's a dead man. And what you see is deliberate, in every respect, all across the board, deliberate meanness toward people. And that's what we're seeing now toward migrants. That the best policy is always the meanest, most demeaning, disgusting one. And that's been true when we saw children in cages in the first Trump administration. So what's missing here from the current debate is respect. Respect for these people as human beings. By the way, two of my grandparents were turned away from America because of a very, very tight immigration policy. And well, I'm here. So eventually my mom made it. But they were migrants because they feared for their lives. My grandfather's parents were murdered by German soldiers in World War I. And they weren't allowed to come here. Don't understand why.
Well, I did, now that we've touched on the moral aspect of it, I wanted to ask you about the fiscal impact And you have local governments that are now apparently obligated to house and care for people suspected of being in Florida illegally. I know there will be some court challenges to all of this, but should Florida's plan survive court challenges, how do you properly allocate those costs with local municipalities?
Well, if the state is going to adopt a uniform state policy, then the state government has to pay for it. It's just not practical any other way. You can't dump massive liabilities on the state and local governments, particularly in some parts of the state where they just have no money. So you can't do that. If the state is going to pay for it, then what we have is what has become the usual concern, which is, why are migrants getting something for free and I'm not? And I'm sensitive to that. Everybody always feels like somebody else might be trying to take advantage of them, and it's understandable. They're here. If we're not incarcerating them, then they can do what they need to do to survive. And if they're incarcerated, then of course it's going to be expensive, and we're going to have to take care of them. If we're talking about short-term arrangements, what I would do is to say that let's treat people with dignity. Nobody really, as far as I know, wants to be in that situation. And we shouldn't be unduly preoccupied over money that's spent for a reasonable humanitarian, humane purpose.
Well, there is another cause of anxiety by interjurisdictional expenses being pushed down, and that is when it comes to emergency management. I'm sure you've been following the administration's discussions of the federal changes that they believe are necessary, and both preparing for major disasters and in recovering from them, with President Trump having said that he thinks that states should bear that burden alone. If that should come to pass, what do you think the legislature should be doing to prepare to support Florida residents during a catastrophic event like a hurricane or wildfires?
Well, when I was in Congress, the practical thing that I did was to try to extend national flood insurance to become national hurricane and tornado and earthquake insurance. And I got a number of people from places with tornadoes and earthquakes to buy into that. So the number one answer is to completely reorganize our risk allocation when it comes to these kinds of risks. If federal government abandons us, they should be held accountable for that. The party that would be abandoning us has almost 3/4 of the seats in Congress from the state, at least 2/3, I think. So, you have to hold people accountable for that. They're literally putting our lives at risk. The fundamental responsibility of government everywhere, all over the world, in all 50 states, in all 193 or 4 countries, is safety. And if the government can't provide that on a national basis, then it's the same as basically allowing the country to suffer a military defeat. The hurricanes are defeating us. The hurricanes are winning. And it has to be dealt with as the national problem. There's no real alternative. But to answer your question, I would be pushing for interstate compacts in lieu of that. And interstate compacts are an actual tool that one could use to take up the slack when the federal government falls down, used very heavily in the western states.
Thank you for that. Another Another bit of fallout from natural disasters, is things like the property insurance market. And Florida's property insurance market hasn't shown very many signs of recovery. I know many insurers are denying and delaying claims at a record pace. What can the legislature do, and what should they do to make insurance more reliable and affordable?
Well, we'll start by changing the ground rules regarding Citizens. Citizens made $800 in profit last year from me. I don't understand what is the point of having a state agency that's supposed to be putting some kind of lid on pricing, go ahead and gouging people for a profit in any year. I just don't understand why we're doing it that way. So the Citizens has to be reformed specifically by making it function in the public interest. The same thing is true for a lot of these insurance companies, and I think what we're seeing is like weak, weirdly pro-insurance regulation of insurance companies coming out of Tallahassee. So basically, the insurance companies aren't being held accountable. They're being kowtowed to by the people who operate state government. That has to change. The regulatory system has to be real. In addition to that, these companies are in fact, including Citizens, providing vast wealth to the reinsurance companies for things that are just not practical. They're supposed to insure against a risk that happens every 225 years. That doesn't make any sense. It should be about 50, maybe. That would be fine. And in addition to that, the system just acts irrationally regarding pricing. And we need much more competition. The competition needs to start with a better performing Citizens operation.
I'm going to switch gears again to an issue that we've talked about for a long time, but has kept moving in the direction of more and more funding being devoted to state-funded education vouchers that can be used in private schools. What changes, if any, do you think Florida should make to the current policy that offers vouchers to any family that wants to use them?
Just reverse it. We have a 250-year-old tradition of public schools in this country. We actually have a 100-year-old tradition of free colleges in this country. That is not the way to go. I understand that the governor has felt a lot of pressure from private schools to go this way. I don't believe that we should replace the public school system with a private school system or some kind of weird polyglot system. This is a good example of, if it isn't broken already, don't try to fix it. The problems that exist in the schools in the state, which are very, very serious and substantial, have nothing to do with basically who is in charge of the school and whether it is a for-profit or nonprofit or public organization. That's not why education is failing in this state. You're not going to solve this problem in all of the vouchers. You're just going to make a few people rich and accommodate other people's tropes. They're ideological tropes.
Well, and you played right into my next question, which is that most Florida children are going to remain in public schools. So how does Florida get back to keeping that promise to maintain the constitutional requirement for a system of free, public, high-quality schools? What would be the priorities there for the legislature?
Well, you have to be empirical about it. I mean, the short answer to it is, I think the single greatest reform that you come up with that would improve people's opportunities in life as they leave school would be curriculum reform. I am all in favor of teaching people about European history, but not in lieu of, let's say, health. not in lieu of accounting, bookkeeping. Whatever it is that would help people to be all they can be in life is what we should be teaching them. And education should be customized more than it is now. We shouldn't have factory schools that just basically teach the same thing to everybody, regardless of what they're interested in, what their talents may be, what their skills may already be. So I think curriculum reform would be number one. I'm also, as a parent of 5 who had to live through this, very concerned about the fact that teenagers are required to come and show up at school at 7:15 in the morning. My teenagers weren't wired that way. And I see a lot of problems in school arising from the fact that for parts of the day, the students just can't be awake. They're just sitting there nodding off.
Well, I can branch over into the next question then.
Go ahead.
6 years ago, many Floridians believed that the safety and health of the state's water supply was one of the top issues. Today, water quality seems to draw little attention, but most sources agree that very little has improved. What specific steps would you push the legislature to consider when it comes to the health of Florida's rivers, lakes, and marshes along the underground aquifer that supplies most of the state's drinking water?
Regarding the water supply, again, what we need is very substantial infrastructure spending to bring Florida into this century. Our infrastructure, it looks like it's 75 years old, or at least it was designed 75 years ago. Beyond that, I think that we should concentrate on what actually are injuries to the environment. In other words, the red tide actually is an injury to the environment. It's not supposed to be that way. So we are unfortunately in a situation where the whole state's been engineered more or less by the Army Corps of Engineers, and we have to think very carefully about what are the consequences of that kind of like high level, enormously expensive engineering and what it does to the environment. So I think we should concentrate on that. I believe that the legislature should require widespread testing of all water sources and all water supplies on a regular basis. We don't know what we don't know. In one river, I heard that they found PCBs. These are things that can hurt you badly, kill you. You don't know there unless you test for it. So we need a universal testing program of people's home water supplies and of our lakes and rivers and so on.
Thank you for that. 15 years ago, you famously described the GOP healthcare plan as "don't get sick." That debate's still ongoing in Florida, which has one of the highest rates of uninsured residents in the country. What more can Florida do to ensure that state residents have access to affordable and accessible healthcare?
Well, I do want to point out that that number went way down when I was in Congress. In particular among Hispanics, when I started, about 40% of the Hispanics in the district had no health coverage. And when we were done, it was around 25. But it was true across the board. And we also, unfortunately, have created this, how should I put this, all too accurate framing about the public debate. I believe that healthcare is a human right. And we should do whatever we can to shelter the homeless, to feed the hungry, and to heal the sick. So what I'm seeing here is just like completely wrong priorities on a fundamental level that have been perpetuated the past 15 years. When Rick Scott zeroed out the state health budget, he was in fact killing people. And we become completely callous to that. When we had 1 million Americans and tens of thousands of Floridians die from COVID, nobody thought, geez, was this avoidable? Could we have done better? You know, New Zealand, only 250 people have died. What are they doing that we're not doing? We don't see any real effort except to say over and over again without doing anything about it that healthcare should be cheaper and more widely available. One last answer to your question, which is if the state had actually adopted the Medicaid expansion that I voted for, first of all, there'd be roughly 1 million people more who would have health coverage in the state, maybe more than that. And secondly, the state would receive $70 billion from the federal government that it didn't get, which is tragic for all of us. So many lost jobs, so much good that could have been done with that money to meet human needs.
Thank you very much for spending this time with us. We have so many more questions we could ask that we know that you are being very generous with your time, and we appreciate you taking the time to talk with us. And before we go to your closing statement, I just wanted to remind the readers who are watching this that while the Sentinel does plan to make an endorsement in this race, we believe that District 15 voters are best served if they do their own research as well. Their candidates have websites, social media presences. They are making appearances at forums like this. And of course, we have our news coverage, which as well. However, we also must remind our readers that our endorsement decisions are made by the editorial board alone. That's Jay, myself, and our executive editor, Roger Simmons. And there is no input or consultation with our colleagues on the news side. But we would like to finish by saying that the candidates in this race are all working hard to earn your vote, and each will have plenty of other opportunities to reach out to you. So take a good look. Decide which one of them best represents your views and your values as a voter in this very big district. Most importantly, remember that whether you vote by mail or at early voting sites or at the polls, the most important thing that you can do in this race is to vote. Without that, it is in the hands of people who might not have your best interests at heart. So with that, we would like to invite Representative Grayson to make a closing statement. And once again, thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you too. My closing statement is this. The voters should vote for Alan Grayson because I will do the best job for them. I will be your friend. That's what you deserve from an elected official. That's what you deserve in return for your vote. I think that what's happened is that so many local officials in both parties are completely ineffective. They don't want you to know about it. But you can see the results all around us. We have horrible public services in many respects at an astronomical price that you and I are paying. It's wrong. It represents a personal failure on the part of so many people we've elected in the past. But in my case, when you elected me, we got an extra $2 billion from the federal government. That's $3,000 for every single person in the district. I passed more laws than any other member of Congress through the House when the Republicans were in charge, even though I'm a Democrat. So there's nobody else who is going to be able to accomplish concrete things to improve our lives like I have and like I will. So that's why I asked for your vote. It's not a vote for me, it's a vote for you. It's your only chance to solve problems that are too big for any of us to solve alone. We can only do that through our vote and through coming together and electing people who are going to meet our standards and do a good job for us. Thanks.